Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us on this iSNAPP webinar. My name is Sarah Atkinson. I am a clinical lead nurse working with the West Yorkshire Primary Care Training Hub, and today I'll be guiding you through our exciting pilot project aimed at supporting student nurses in placements across PCNs. Why the need for change? So we're seeing a growing demand for primary care student nurse placements. The students are asking for it, the universities are asking for it. But we also know there's been a decline in practice placements following COVID pandemic. At the same time, we know our workforce is ageing, which makes it more important than ever to share knowledge and experience. We also are aware that supervisors and assessors are already managing a significant workload, and supporting student nurses can sometimes feel like an additional pressure they're not currently equipped to take on, especially at a practice level. We are also seeing a shift towards that wider collaboration within PCNs, and this has sparked the need for a more structured, sustainable approach. In addition to them reasons for changing, we also had the 2018 standards for supervision and assessment introduced. This has a significant change. So we moved away from relying on a single mentor and towards a much more collaborative team approach. Now students are supported both by practice supervisors and practice assessors, which can prevent small practices being able to support student nurses. But at a PCN level, this could actually increase our flexibility to support student nurses, which we'll go on to show you how that might work. So iSNAPP. So iSNAPP is short for Indirect Student Nurse Assessor Placement Pilot. Bit of a mouthful, which is why we're calling it iSNAPP, so you can say it a bit easier. But it's designed to make us use of the team-based model across PCNs. So for this, each PCN would have a named indirect nurse practice assessor who coordinates the placements and supports supervisors and assessors across the PCN. Before we go into the details of iSNAPP, we just wanted to give a bit of background on how this pilot came about. We've picked up a lot of great insights from others along the way, such as the Leeds PCN Student Nurse Pilot. This pilot was launched by Hayley Ingleson and focused on embedding student leadership within student nurse placements. Third year placement students had a main place practice assessor and then had supervisors in other practices. Part of that project was that they would then have student-led clinics. These clinics initially were around NHS health checks, and Hayley did a lot of work around timetabling them in to be involved in lots of different areas of learning before they could undertake the NHS health checks. They were supported to go on and do their blood training, looking at health inequalities, but very much led and coordinated by Hayley, the PLF and the PCN. Placement. The outcomes were really good. We saw the need for a more structured placement approach, learnt that nurse practice assessors are key leaders, collaboration across the PCNs improved placement quality. With better staff training, there could be increased engagement and retention. But one of the constraints we found was support needed was time. You know, people needed time to plan the placements. Hayley, the PLF, very much spent a lot of time helping the assessor to plan them placements. So we needed that organised support and funding to hopefully help with that. So another programme that I came across was the Chester University long arm approach to placement supervision and assessment. So this method was to provide assessment in sort of PIVO areas. These are private, independent and voluntary organisations where they wouldn't normally have a registrant who is based there. So they wouldn't have nurses, for instance, who could then be the assessors. So what they did was they had lecturers who would be long arm assessors for these PIVO areas. This was really good. It allowed them to have students in areas that they wouldn't normally have had. It boosted placement capacity. Really successful. Some of the barriers though were it involved significant investment in visiting lecturers, their time and the cost to facilitate that. So when looking at creating a pilot, we did consider hiring assessors like Chester did, but we are fortunate to already have registrants. So we already have nurse assessors and supervisors available in our PCNs who can support students. While we don't have the same recurrent funding as Chester did, we do have the people and the practice nurse assessors, and the Leeds pilot has shown how valuable their time and leadership can be. So iSNAPP is there to build on offering that structured support with funding, training, and making it hopefully more sustainable and scalable. So iSNAPP hopefully is going to be a structured, sustainable approach to increasing placements. So iSNAPP offers £1,500 to each participating PCN to support some release time of the indirect nurse practice assessor. It's along with that clinical tariff that you get for having student nurses, hopefully will allow practices to dedicate some time and space for quality placements. As part of the iSNAPP, we also ask that all nurses within the PCN undertake supervisor and assessor training. This will give more supervisors and assessors available to help support other students across the rest of the PCN, and hopefully would help with collaboration across the PCN, nursing teams and wider teams as well. So how might it work? So to help to visualise it, we've created a couple of flowcharts. So just give a bit of an explanation. So this primary care network consists of 3 practices. Currently, practice 1 and 2 each have either 1 or 2 practice nurse supervisors, but do not have a practice assessor. Practice 3 has both a practice nurse supervisor and a practice nurse assessor. Under the current setup, practices 1 and 2 would be unable to support student nurse placements independently because they lack that additional assessor. With the introduction of the iSNAPP project, the existing practice nurse assessor in practice 3 could undertake the role of an indirect assessor for the other 2 practices as part of this pilot. The assessor would support the practice nurse supervisors across all 3 practices and act as an indirect assessor for the student nurses. So the model would be it'll enable student nurses to gain experience across all the practices within the PCN, and it also allows practices 1 and 2, which would previously couldn't host student nurses, to start taking placements and participate. It also provides student nurses with a broader range of learning experience. Now we know all PCNs aren't set up quite as easy as that first one, so we have tried to incorporate maybe a little bit more complicated one. So this PCN, these are all just examples. This PCN is a 5 practice PCN. So practice 1 has a nurse who has not yet completed any practice supervisor training. They may be newly qualified, they may just never have done the training, which is perfectly fine. Practice 2 has both practice nurse supervisors and assessors. Practice 3 and 5 each have 1 practice nurse supervisor. At present, practice 2 is fully equipped to support student nurse placements and is the only practice with an assessor. As with the previous PCN example, this existing practice nurse assessor could take on the role of the indirect assessor for the entire PCN, supporting and supervising the other practices. Through the iSNAPP project, there is an expectation that with the training, like we said earlier, that all these supervisors would do training to move on to be assessors as well as supervisors, and the nursing practice 1 would be expected to do the same, to do that supervisor and assessor training. But the indirect assessor is also there to support them. So if you've got a new practice supervisor who then develops to be a practice assessor, that PCN indirect assessor can support them in that role to make sure that they're up to speed, that they're supported, that they support the students and provide a better placement. And then over time, this approach would reduce the reliance on that indirect practice assessor, as the responsibilities for assessment of students can then be shared across the whole of the network. So let's look at the benefits and what's on offer. So there's the funding, 1,500 to cover release time of the practice nurse indirect assessor, plus the clinical tariff that you get for each individual placement and student that comes. You've then got potential recruitment opportunity. We've seen this with the Leeds pilot and across West Yorkshire, that when students come out to primary care and get to see what primary care is like, they will often consider it as a job when newly qualified. Staff professional development. So part of this iSNAPP project is that nurses take on the supervisor and assessor training. This will also give that increased supervisor and assessor pool for future planning. PCN collaboration is encouraging practices to work together with open communication within the teams across the PCN. As a training hub, we have created an MS Teams channel, and this is for peer support for those that are involved in the pilot. So what are our expectations of PCNs? So we're asking PCNs to commit to growing student placements by at least 6 students per year. So that's 2 per cohort, and that's across the PCN. PCNs would be expected to provide a structured supervision and assessment plan, showing where they plan the students to be, who might be their assessors, who might be their supervisors, and plans for them maybe to be involved in any supported service delivery plans. Each placement, so each practice would need to commit to having a learning environment assessment audit. So generally speaking, you have to have one of these if you're having a student in your practice. So at a PCN level, we would need to do that for each practice participating in the pilot. Just briefly, some of the responsibilities of the practice nurse assessor. So this is a vital role in this pilot. They're going to act as the main contact for students and practices, support the assessors and supervisors across the PCN. They'll liaise with the universities and ourselves at the training hub. And their aim is to help maintain a positive environment, and they should be promoting that structured learning environment across the PCN. Some of the other benefits, as more staff complete the supervision and assessment training, the pool of available assessors and supervisors will grow. The PCNY system helps manage unexpected absences and recruitment issues, making placements more resilient and sustainable in the long run. So, for instance, currently if a practice has 1 assessor and 1 or 2 supervisors, and someone goes on long-term sick, that adds more pressure to those that are left behind in that practice. If the assessor was off sick and there was only then supervisors left in the practice, the student may then have to leave that placement. With the PCN-wide iSNAPP approach, the student would be moving across the practices. So if this same scenario occurred, the other assessors and supervisors in the other practices would then hopefully be able to support. The assessors might be able to do long-arm assessment. The student may be able to spend a little bit less time in one practice that might be struggling with recruitment, but more time in another practice that currently isn't. So it helps to support that much more PCN-wide collaboration and support. And it hopefully will help show that practice placements are sustainable. So hopefully going forward, you'll have these practice assessors, practice supervisors, and they'll work together to share students across the PCN, making it more sustainable, more easier for you guys to support students in the long run. Thank you very much for taking the time and listening to this webinar. If you have any questions about iSNAPP or how you can get involved, we'd love to hear from you. Use the email on screen and drop us an email and we'll get right back to you. Thank you all very much.